Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Heyman. I am the Vice President of Controls Central, and I want to say thank you all for joining us. We know you got a busy day, and we appreciate you jumping on this call. We're going to get right to it. There's just a couple of things I want to mention here at the beginning. If you've been on a Controls Central webinar before, you'll know we always mute the calls. We'd love to have a big open discussion, but it makes it very difficult and a lot of distracting noises. So it will be muted. However, our presenter today definitely wants your questions, and there will be time at the end. So you'll each see a chat box, and we invite you and encourage you to put your questions into the chat box. And at the end, Steve will get to every one of those and be glad to answer them. A couple of other things I want to mention. The webinar today is being recorded, and an on-demand link will be sent out to each of you. If there's someone else in your company that you would like to get this information that wasn't able to be on the call, so that will be available. Couple last things about Controls Central. We're living in crazy times with all of the virus problems and companies and businesses and restaurants closing. We want you to know that Controls Central is fully operational. We've got over 2.5 million parts in stock. We're ready to ship. We're working, and we also have technical product information available. So please view us as your resource during these difficult times. Also, and I will mention this at the end, if you are interested in opening a new account with Controls Central, just get a hold of our Controls Central team, and we are going to offer 30-day terms. So we're looking for ways to make it easy for you to get product, give you a little delay there on payment. So we think it's a perfect opportunity right now for some of you to get set up with us as a new account. So anyway, that's all that I had in terms of sort of housekeeping items. I'd like to introduce our presenter. This is a Testo webinar today, and our presenter is Steve Pascuzzo. Steve is the sales manager for the commercial division of Testo. We're also going to have on the end, John Loxterkamp will be joining us. He is the business unit manager for Testo. So we've got the big guns with us today. And Steve, say thank you for being on the call. Thank you all of the rest of you. Steve, it's all yours. Take it away.
Well, Jim, thank you very much about big guns, but we got that's for sure.
Good.
So today we're going to speak about and talk about indoor air quality, and we've heard the term for decades, right? But there's been some recent developments in quantifying what indoor air quality means from a performance standpoint for the workers and the occupants in buildings, and how Testo can make be a big factor in helping you at Controls that are Control Central customers to increase your business by using Testo 400 products to assist in collecting this really important data for IAQ for commercial spaces. Next. So green buildings have been around for a while, and the question I've got that I've had for a while is like, geez, why are we building green buildings? We were told back in the 90s that they were more efficient. So engineers designed higher SEER HVAC systems. They put in more efficient plumbing products, recycled carpet from old car tires, flooring made from plastic bottles, use of non-pressure treated wood to mitigate formaldehyde and aldehyde, and maybe even photovoltaic, like in the picture you see there, maybe even planting plants on the exterior of buildings. That's a real photograph, by the way, to basically have a more efficient building. And next, the interesting thing was that the whole scheme was to make the buildings better for the occupants, for the workers, for the students, so they would be more productive and work would flow, output would flow, right? Next. But something happened, once these buildings were built, they tended to be, more costly, not just to build, but also to maintain. Because you can imagine if you're putting in a bunch of new subcontractor, material goods into a building, they're going to need some specialized contractors, right? Contractors to maintain photovoltaic systems, to maintain specially coated windows and exteriors in the buildings and whatnot. So there was a head scratching going on a bit in the industry saying, okay, well, how are we going to quantify the extra cost to actually build a green building? Next. So back a few years ago, back in 2016, 4 institutions got together: Harvard School of Public Health, which is a world-renowned environmental health and safety department within Harvard University; Syracuse University, which within their engineering department, they actually built a research commercial building on campus called the IAQ lab. SUNY Upstate Medical Center provided a series of psychologists to develop some testing methodology, and United Technologies underwrote the entire project, the testing project. Next. And what they did was they actually developed the very first double-blind study, all right, to quantify, what actually is a sick building. Okay, what are the benefits? And so the 4 of these got together. Harvard contributed the brain power. In that middle picture, that is the IAQ lab. It's hard to see, but they actually built a really unique engineered building. Upstate provided the, again, psychological testing, and United Technologies provided the funding. Next. And it resulted in this study called and it's a long title, so bear with me, Associations of Cognitive Function Scores with Carbon Dioxide Ventilation and Volatile Organic Compound Exposures in Office Workers, a controlled exposure study of green and conventional office environments. You can cut and paste this title or take even part of it with the authors' names down there that you see that are Allen and McNaught and Salish. And you go to Google Scholar and you can actually download I believe it's a 9 or 10 page research paper. Next. And this is what they did. They actually went out and, solicited the 24 volunteers, all professional office workers of all kinds of disciplines. It covered the age range of 20 to 70-year-olds, white, black, and Latinos, and they worked in this research building. You can see the office cubicles above for 2 straight weeks, 8-hour days. At the end of each day, toward the end of each day, at the 6th hour, they were given a 1.5-hour cognitive test. And the test was going to measure a bunch of values to determine, are they being cognitively impaired, whether the building was set up as a conventional building or a green building or a green plus building. And again, Syracuse University had the ability to configure the HVAC system to represent, the interior environment of all 3 types of buildings. Next. So the test methodology was basically, number one, the volunteers, importantly, did not know what day or what time of day that the building environment was going to be converted between these 3 different values: conventional, green, or green plus. The criteria: conventional building was established to be at about 960 parts per million of CO2. Just for a reference, our outdoor ambient CO2 levels when you're just outside in open air is somewhere between 385 to a little over 400 parts per million. The green building was set to between the low to mid 700 parts per million, and the green plus building at 525 ppm or parts per million. And then they also they fixed the total VOCs or volatile organic compounds, things like formaldehyde and whatnot, in the conventional building at 500 micrograms for the conventional testing, and then at 50 micrograms for the green and green plus building. So after taking the 6-hour test, what they found was they varied the concentration of CO2 and of the VOCs, more importantly, without the volunteers knowing. And they found the biggest effect, cognitive effect, related to, importantly enough, CO2 and not the VOCs. Next. And the next slide shows us these are the 9 cognitive parameters that they were tested on. And I think it's arguable that the first 3 are probably the most important in a work or office or a school or college environment. one on information usage, on strategy, and on crisis response. And you can see the numbers. And these numbers in the green category of 172% better in information usage in a green building versus the conventional building, and then up another jump to 299% for the green enhanced building. Really important values, right? And so overall, when they took all 9 of these parameters, the average was a 61% increase in mental capacity of all types during this testing. And they even went back into this research, and they actually unknowingly would decrease the CO2 in buildings and then would increase it. And there was an inverse relationship to cognitive scores increasing when CO2 went down and cognitive scores decreasing when CO2 went up. Next. So you might be asking yourself the question, okay, Steve, how did they establish these values of 900 to 1,000 and 700 to 500? So they wanted to be conservative because today, ASHRAE recommendation is that the interior building environment of a commercial building of any type should be at about 700 parts per million above outdoor levels. So take the outdoor level of 400, add that to 700, and you're going to be in the 1,100 to 1,200 parts per million range. So worst case scenario, they were testing in the upper 9s to low 1,000 range on their report. And the other backdrop to this was the testing has come in independently from the Boston public school system, Washington, Idaho, and Texas school systems, where they actually went out to hundreds and hundreds of classrooms in those states, and they have classroom levels somewhere between 800 to 1,000 to 1,200 parts per million. So that's where the conservative, conventional part per million values were established. Next. So how did they get the ventilation, or how did they get the CO2 reduction down to 700 and then to 500 parts per million? Well, what quite simply is there's a saying in the air pollution industry on the process side, the solution to pollution is dilution. So the more outside air you can bring in to dilute a facility, the part per million density or part per million count is going to drop for CO2 to bring it in more in line with outside environments. And that's what resulted in the increase in cognitive performance. Next. I like this graphic because it kind of shows it side by side, conventional versus green. Next slide, please. And these are the top 3 areas that we just reviewed a couple of slides ago: crisis response, strategic thinking, and information usage. And next. They also did a part 2 of this test across the country. They said, okay, let's take it out of the research lab and let's do this in 10 buildings in 10 states across the United States for a much longer test period with hundreds of workers. And I believe they did it for at least a month. And what they found out was that over the period of a month with hundreds of workers in 10 buildings across 10 cities, there was a measurable drop in sick leave or sick time or reduced working hours due to illness by the workers, where they calculated that resulted in an increased productivity over the course of 1 year per worker of a little over $6,000 to the good for the corporation or the business they were working for. This is really critical to have that information, because now a building owner can look at this data. He can say, okay, yeah, I know it's going to cost me more to bring in, 20 CFM more of air per person, from 20 up to 40 CFM. That's easily bounced off by this increase in productivity. Next slide, please. So here's a good example. If you were not using any kind of energy efficient technology to help precondition that outside air, going from 20 CFM per person to 40, it's going to cost you, between $14 to $40 per person per year to double that airflow of outside air. But today, and I'm sure many of you controls contractor customers might even buy and sell these products, but they're called ERVs and HRVs, and basically they will extract latent heat from exhaust air leaving a building and move it over to the incoming fresh air side to try to pre-temper and preheat the supply air coming in for fresh outside air. It'll do the opposite for that airflow in the summertime. And using ERV technology with controls technology in the rooms to know when to initiate and activate the ERV HRV system, you're going to get a tremendous drop in the cost per person per year to add that additional HVAC technology to mitigate the CO2. So that's quite important here. Next slide, please. So what's the market opportunity for everybody on the call today? So to kind of baseline it, going back to the latest census that we have is 2012 data that I've got. But back in 2012, there were about 5.6 million commercial buildings in the United States. You could probably take that number and add 20% to that today. But 70% of them were more than 20 years old. And 48% of those 5.6 million buildings have no means of mechanical fresh air technology to bring into the building to reduce the CO2. I find that astounding. And so the question is, how do we educate our building owners and property managers about the existing CO2 conditions in these buildings that are not being properly ventilated? So we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about now how Testo can be your gateway to develop new commercial business for Control Central customers. And the first step would be to baseline that building's current CO2 condition with the IAQ 400, the Testo IAQ 400. Because of its significant data logging capability and memory capacity and ability to generate internal reports right from a device that can be emailed or Bluetoothed to your client, this would be, in essence, the way that you would use Testo to qualify a new project to mitigate the CO2 in that facility. What does the forward system comprise of? Let's go to the next slide. It comprises of any one of a number of things, but the probe stand that would hold the probes that would measure not only CO2, but could measure humidity, turbulence, light levels, sound levels, air volume, differential pressure, and radiant temperature. That probe stand is in the upper right-hand picture of this slide here, and it can hold up to 6 probes. And the beauty about Testo's system is that we have pretty much all certified NEBB probes. They are Bluetooth capable or wired probes. You can conduct 2 measuring tests at 2 different office locations at the same time, depending on how many probes you've got. And with the internal, really easy to use data control software, you can migrate, that testing time, and we can log well over 1 million values over the course of 2 weeks, depending upon the number of probes that we've got, right to the PC that you've got with your data control software from Testo. Next slide, please. There's also another important ASHRAE standard that was just updated back in 2017 called ASHRAE 55. And this has to do with the comfort of a worker at their working location, whether they are at a standing job or a sitting position job. There are now specific values such as the mean radiant temperature that's radiating in from the outside, the actual local temperature around that worker, the relative humidity in their environment, the airspeed, air turbulence. So all of those are separate probes that can give a very specific report to satisfy the ASHRAE 55 standard. And workers these days, they have a lot more power than they used to have back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? And the standard requires that 80% of all occupants in a building must be thermally comfortable in order to meet this standard. So this is a newer standard that's been out for a few years, and it's becoming more prevalent, I believe, in our industry. So Testo has basically pre-configured the 400 into several types of kits, an IAQ kit, a ASHRAE 55 comfort kit, et cetera, to satisfy this testing protocol for your end users. Next. And then once that data is collected for, let's say, ASHRAE 55 testing, And again, you can actually display it and record it locally. That's the image you see in the lower right-hand corner of that graph. And interestingly, this entire protocol is called the predicted mean vote and predicted mean discomfort level of the worker. And it gives you this arbitrary value between -5 to 0 to +5. You can also obviously port it over to your PC and have it displayed locally for report generation. Next. So where do we go to generate these new projects for you guys that are on the phone today, on the presentation today? Number one, all commercial buildings. As we discussed in the beginning, there are millions of commercial buildings out there that have no makeup air. Municipal buildings for towns and cities. Elementary, secondary education, community college, dormitories. I just did a presentation at the Prescott Town Hall 2 weeks ago with their city engineering department, and they were ecstatic about having the ability to talk to the Parent Teachers Association group about baselining the CO2 in their classrooms, both secondary and elementary, and then putting a plan in place to upgrade, where necessary, their HVAC system to keep the CO2 levels low. Hotels have the same problem. We've all stayed in them, right? Only the newer hotels, I believe, and I've been to a bunch of them the past couple of months, have exhaust air in the bathroom. Most only have the small duct, the wall-mounted AC unit under the window. In older apartments, this country went through a huge apartment condominium boom in the 80s and 90s. Well, now those systems are now, going on, 30 years old. Hard to believe, but yes, they're that old. And they are a prime candidate as well for testing for CO2 contamination and occupant comfort. Next slide. Who do we actually go see to talk to about, being able to go into their building and establish and create this report and give them the data that they need to make this decision? Well, number one in my mind would be commercial property managers. I just picked CBRE because they're the largest in the country as far as managing commercial properties. But you have the Collier Group, you've got many others regionally across the country. So those of you in whatever area you are in the U.S., I would definitely reach out to the local vice president or local manager for your biggest property firm. And you know what? Give me and John Loxerkamp a call, and I will be happy to fly down and kick things off to do a presentation. Multifamily properties, same thing. Property managers there are large multifamily property management organizations across the country. Greystar and Pinnacle are a few of the largest ones in the U.S. School districts and colleges, we want to get in touch with, the administration, but more so the head of facilities or the head of environmental health and safety. And then hotel and motel franchise owners or the management groups that manage these hotels. Some are franchised by a ownership group. Some are actually just management groups that don't own the hotel, but they manage the property. Next slide. The beauty about IAQ is it is not a seasonal business, guys. It's year round. In HVAC and in controls, a lot of our stuff is seasonal. We get geared up in March and April to get ready for the summer months and the cooling season. We get geared up once again in September, October, November, depending on what part of the country you're in, for the winter heating season. But having a year-round business is really a win to smooth out sales opportunities for every company. It's also a win-win situation for our control contractors and our mechanical contractors and the end users. For the end users, commercial property managers can now tout that they have a cognitively enhanced work environment. Tell me that's not a competitive advantage to other property management buildings that they're competing with in their metropolitan area. Same thing on the hotel management side and the college side. Cognitively enhanced hotels or a cognitively enhanced campus to attract the best, most prized students and professors, highly sellable, right? And school districts, what parent does not want to have their children in a cognitively enhanced elementary or secondary environment when they're not home for 8 to 10 hours a day? Next slide. So So I'm here to help you guys, and I'm here to do everything I can to help you with presentations, make trips when we can make trips, right? But right now, teleconferencing and web seminars, I'm ready and able to do. But the bottom line is that I'm here to support you guys. My counterpart, John Loxterkamp, who knows you guys quite well, is also here to support you. But give us a ring, and we would be happy to kind of walk you through the process to develop this new business opportunities. I've got my contact information there, and I also want to thank Jim and Harshal for setting up this webinar today. I really want to thank all the attendees from Control Central for participating today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions I can.
Okay. Steve, good job. Wow, excellent. Lots of material. You know what, maybe I could do, this is our Q&A time, and I might start out with one, and I would encourage you, all of the attendees on the call, please, this is your opportunity. Type your questions in the chat box, and we're going to get to all of those. Just before we have John Loxterkamp come on, I want to ask Harshal, are you seeing any questions in your box yet? And then I have one. Harshal, what have you have?
Jim, yeah, I don't see any questions yet.
Okay. Steve, I have one. If you're talking about indoor air quality, and if there's a contractor on this call who maybe doesn't typically do any prospecting for new business, what guidance would you give them if they wanted to look for that? How would they do that?
Yeah, so kind of what I was kind of closing on it toward the last couple of slides, and it bears reinforcing because going out and digging for new business, it's not an easy thing. I think we're all used to having a book of business and an existing client base that we serve all the time, and we have the phone calls coming in every morning, and we set up our service calls and whatnot. But I mean, in this environment, and the fact that I think the country as a whole, with regard to coronavirus, is really acutely attuned now to air quality. Okay, and I think that the members that are on the call today and on the presentation today will have a far easier time of that door opening for us to come in and present our pitch, if you will, on how to mitigate indoor air quality, and not only have it be a win for them, but also for their customers, right? So my advice would be regionally, I would directly go to finding out who the regional rep or area vice president is for the largest property management firms for commercial buildings. I start with Collier Group. I would start with CBRE. I've extended out just over the past week initial emails to, for example, CBRE has they have 4 regional directors of facilities management in the U.S. There's 2 guys on the East Coast and 2 on the West. And so I'm trying to hit them at a very, very high level, okay? And I'm doing that strategically so that when, our customers here today go out and reach the head of facilities, and the facilities person for building XYZ for CBRE calls his regional facilities director and says, hey, these guys came in talking about Testo, about CO2. What are they talking about? That way, their upper management will be prepped for the phone call, and they'll understand where this is coming from. So that's an initial strategy just to try to get in the door. I would also approach, and LinkedIn is a great tool today, right? LinkedIn is a great way. I've got a premium membership. I've reached out to many people in our industry that I would normally not be able to see, just because the amount of connections that one has on LinkedIn. And buy a premier membership. It gives you, I think, like 10 unique messages to send out to people that you're not connected to. And you can do a search on LinkedIn just by title, or just do a Google search, which is what I've been doing. But call us. John Loxterkamp and myself, we are more than happy to assist you guys to develop this business, and it is real business, right? There is a pent-up demand here for, having a better work environment, and I can't reiterate strong enough, the effect that it would have on everybody from parents to upper management executives in a building, to the property managers and hotel owners and administrations at school districts, of what it would mean to have cognitively enhanced environments for their people to spend the day in.
Okay, Steve, excellent. I would just add, I mentioned this at the beginning. This is Jim with Controls Central again. If you're on this call as a contractor and you would like to open a new account with us, maybe getting into indoor air quality will mean some of these new products that Testo has coming out. If you would like to open a new account with us, we're offering 30-day net terms for new customers or new accounts. So if that's of interest to you, please get a hold of the Controls Central team. Dominic and his people will be glad to work with you on that. We're ready to go. We're fully operational and shipping, and we've got tech support. So Harshal, real quick, I'll check with you one last time if there's any other questions, and then John, I'd like to see if you'd be willing to kind of do a wrap up here. Harshal, any other questions?
No questions so far, Jim.
Okay, all right. Well, then let me introduce John Loxterkamp. John is the business unit manager with Testo. And John, thanks for being available. What would you like to add to what Steve has shared here today?
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for the attendees on the call. This is truly the new normal, and it is something that all of us are going through, and as unique and as crazy as it seems, it's opportunities like this to do what we normally do, whether it's in person or like this right now on a webinar, is what keeps us all going. So thank you guys for the access to the members and for giving us the opportunity. I would just kind of reiterate what Steve has already said, to the extent that indoor air quality has been something that Testo has been doing for some time. But to be brutally honest with folks, we brought Steve on based on his background and experience to really focus on that as a division for us. And I'm struggling with how to say this other than to say, in years gone by, we've always recognized the significance of the opportunity, but we had been heretofore so focused on what our bread and butter was that we really didn't give it justice. So we decided to invest in the talents of somebody like Steve to really focus on it. And we feel really confident that not only with Steve, but the product portfolio that he has behind him, we're moving in the right direction. Now, sadly for the world, we're experiencing what we're experiencing. But the good news is we are everybody on this call is an important part of society moving forward. And the even better news is that Testo has products that have been vetted, that are current and available to really help folks today and in the future. So Steve's availability will be virtual for the time being, but rest assured, as soon as we get the fly zone or the no-fly zone repealed, a whole lot of us will be getting back out and doing this in person. So please, please, please reach out to Jim if you're looking to set up an account. Reach out to Steve if you have an existing customer that you feel like you could use some help in presenting. And I'll certainly help when and where appropriate as I can, looking after the HVAC side. But this is really more about Steve and the commercial side and things that we're doing with the IAQ really on a commercial level. So thanks again. Good. If anybody has any questions, please speak now, or Jim will beat you up.
Yeah, right. Well, thanks, John. Listen, I think it was evident from what John's saying and also Steve, and certainly you've seen the amount of information that was communicated today. Maybe they can't jump on an airplane, but if you have some people in your company you would like to get some additional training, just give them a call. Just get a hold of Testo, or you can get a hold of us at Controls Central. Also, as I mentioned, the webinar has been recorded, so this one's available today. So we're doing our best to make sure you've got the tools you need, and Testo has the products you need to do this indoor air quality work, and it's quite an opportunity. We're hearing that indoor air quality is a very hot issue right now. People are caring more than they ever have about what they're breathing, what's in the air. So we think there's quite an opportunity. So if there's nothing further, John, thank you. I want to say thank you to Harshal Mahangre. He is our technical IT director running this whole program. Steve, thank you for an excellent webinar. We appreciate your time. We good?
Thank you so much, guys. Yep.
Hey, Jim,
Thank you.
Yeah,
go ahead,
quick,
Harshal.
Jim, there's one question that came in. Yeah.
Thank you. Go
There's
ahead.
a question from James. Yeah, there's a question from James Hanshai, and James is asking, is there a PDF of the complete Testo product line that can be sent to us?
John or Steve?
Not up. We have it broken up into product categories. We have product brochures for each product segment, like for the IAQ, for emissions, for AC service. But we have it broken down by product category based on the application, pretty much. John, are you going to add to that?
Yeah, what I would say is go to the Testo website, and you will be able to break down what Steve was referring to, the various leading product clusters, if you will, of the portfolio. So whether it's emission, whether it's thermal, whether it's commercial, it's all broken down there. And the other thing I would say as you go there, and Control Central has much of this information as well. Go to the website. There's a YouTube channel out there. There's some great videos, short 2, 3, 4 minute videos on various things. And if you still can't find what you're looking for, certainly give us a call. Send us an email, give us a phone call. However you can get in touch with us, we're happy to do that.
I'm on the website now, and if anybody goes to the Testo.com website, the very first two things you can click on the upper left-hand corner is either products or applications. So that's a good starting point.
Okay, very good. Well, again, thanks everyone. I want to say thank you for all of the attendees on the call today. Please remember, if you would like to open a new account with Control Central, we're offering 30-day net terms. We'd be glad to talk with you more about that, so give us a call. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Thank you to Testo. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.